The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network.
With so many probiotics out there, how do you choose one that truly supports your whole body wellness? At BiotiQuest, we believe your gut is the gateway to vibrant health. Our proprietary probiotic guilds work synergistically with your body, using scientifically selected strains you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're seeking better blood sugar balance, deeper sleep, immune resilience, or heart health, our formulas are crafted to support the whole you, physically, emotionally, and energetically. We're founded on microbiome science, backed by transparency, and inspired by nature. And with our 30-day money-back guarantee, you can experience the shift with confidence. Visit biotiquest.com and take the first step toward natural vitality from the inside out.
Join us this September 8th to rediscover the lost spiritual history of the West. Celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Esoteric Quest, brought to you by the New Center of New York in the beautiful lakes and mountains of Ascona, Switzerland, and find the Mountain of Truth and the birth of the counterculture. Travel to the era of the writer Hermann Hesse, psychologist Carl Jung, and spiritual philosopher Rudolf Steiner with companions in a warm spirit of exploration. Learn more at esotericquest.org.
Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
Okay, this deck is, I tried to do like summary things. So my first one was light. This one is When My Soul Whispered, but it's got a little bee on it and it's really pretty. So the card is Journey. And it's got like, I don't know, it looks like a snake, circle snake with splotches. It's hard to say, but
and is he eating himself?
Yeah, it looks like he's kind of eating himself. Let's see what this has to say.
Hey.
Journey. Okay, the quote is, I am sacred of... Hello, I said it again.
It's sacred. We got it.
It's not sacred. It's scared. That's what I'm saying.
I know, but apparently you're supposed to know you're sacred right now, okay?
I guess, okay.
Take that message.
So there we go. Okay. Oh, here's Journey. So I'm scared of failure all the time, but I'm not scared enough to stop trying. When working toward a goal, always remember to congratulate yourself for the little victories along the way. When you become caught up in the end game, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that those little steps of progress are insignificant. Be grateful for each one of these little wins. Life is not a linear path from the cradle to the grave. It's a journey of many beginnings, many endings, and many detours. Throughout your journey, there are times when you will find yourself knocked down, falling short of the mark, or disappointed that the cards have not fallen in your favor. It's time to remind yourself that all these things are part of the journey through life, and it is through these difficult experiences that you will find victories all the sweeter. Embrace each and every experience as they offer you a lesson, an appreciation for an opportunity for gratitude, Failure is not a journey. Failure is not an ending to a journey, but rather a learning curve from which you will emerge more brilliant than ever before. Stay the course, remain humble, and above all, remember that what might seem like an ending is actually a beautiful beginning. So my sacred words, I understand that failure is not an ending, but simply an opportunity for growth. And so I guess that's what this means, is it's continuing. It's never ending. It's always, it's always connected. So that's
which I think actually lends itself, again, I don't want to be corny or anything, but really does lend itself to talking about the show that we're talking about today, which is Shrinking on Apple Plus or Apple TV.
I think it's Apple Plus. I think it's Apple Plus.
Okay.
I think so.
So, okay, it stars Jason Segel as Jimmy, and it has a bunch of stars, but the main ones are Jason Segel, and who was in How I Met Your Mother, and Harrison Ford as Paul.
So good.
Yeah.
So good in that part.
Yeah, he really was. I just thought, if I were to imagine what Harrison Ford would be like in real life, I kind of picture him playing.
Totally.
So, and Jason Segel, I guess too. Also, spoiler alert, Jason Segel loves the Muppets, so we're
That's
pals.
right. That's right.
But I just so the show, I just was going to give you a little bit of a premise is that a therapist, Jimmy Laird, is dealing with severe grief after his wife's death, and he begins to breach ethical barriers to therapy because he doesn't feel like his patients are making progress fast enough.
Yeah.
So he's making these massive changes to his and their lives, and kind of the results of those, and tied in with the relationship with his daughter and his friends, and really kind of, I would guess, you could just say an overall theme of grief and dealing with the grief and having to live a life while it's falling apart.
Right.
And I think we've all had moments like that, you know, that, and maybe not to this degree where we're making unethical decisions.
Right.
But maybe we, you know, and kind of like that card said, like failure isn't, I would say some of the things he did were failures.
Right.
I would say.
Right.
And yet it didn't take him out, which really surprised me. In some places, like, you know, that one guy got beat up pretty bad, and he's still able to come back from that.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing that. I loved, you know, seeing that. So, tell me a little bit about why you liked it or why you kept watching it. Cause that first episode's a doozy. I'm telling you, I thought, I don't know.
Well, I think just to piggyback on what you said, you know, I mean, here he had this failure, but then in the lives of some of his clients, it was what helped, you know, facilitate change for them. You know, it was what so it was like, okay, you know, it changes the idea of failure. And I think it's interesting. It's called shrinking because, you know, you call like a therapist a shrink, but it is this idea of, you know, this shrinking in, you know, of, you know, the ego, you know, he had to shrink that ego. And yeah, he was a drug addict. He was, you know, he was a terrible, terrible dad for a while, you know, but I think at the same time, to really understand that grief and trauma, you know, because that was a trauma to have his wife pass away suddenly in a car accident. Our system can go into havoc. I mean, it can just go into havoc. And that it's not just I'm hungry for this drug, it's about the pain. You know, I think Gabor Mate says we ask why the addiction. The question is to ask why the pain, you know, because the addiction is to get you through the pain. And so
numb it.
yeah. Well, and I'm really interested in, you know, I do a lot of coaching and things like that, and I'm in therapy, and so I'm really interested in the way therapy shows up for people, because it wasn't that long ago where therapy was considered new age. Just any kind of therapy was considered new age. Even still to this day, people don't believe in it. I know there's people that they were having some marital trouble, and it was suggested, this is in 2025, you know, maybe to go to therapy. And the answer was, well, then you might as well give up on your marriage. Like going to therapy meant giving up on your marriage. And I was just like, wow. So therapy still isn't a necessity. Like, and it's like, and it really is to me. I mean, it's like we deal with our, you know, our physical body needs checkups. Why wouldn't our mental body or emotional body need some care, like some professional care? I just think you've got to have something there. And like we go to therapy every other week, and to me, it's like I say, it's like having a you know, a trainer at the gym. Like, yeah, I can just read a book, but it's nice to have somebody you know, walk through and like, hey, this is what's happening, you know, and just, you know, especially for me, you know, I've lost both my parents, and so Jackie's like my parent, you know, that I can say, hey, this happened, what should I do? Or this is coming up for me, and I have somebody to go to like that. And so it's not necessarily, we were just talking about this on our way home last week, because I said, I want to keep my appointment because it's something that you know, sometimes we're just there kind of chatting. There's nothing really to work on, but I like the opportunity to get it out if I need to have that appointment set, you know, so who knows how long we'll be there. But, you know, the way that they therapy each other. There is a certain way that they show up that you begin to learn. You can learn by watching that show what it's like. They meet them, because I've learned so much about therapy and that process of counseling. I can pick it up, where the Mago dialogue or the different kinds of
Yeah.
therapies that they use to see each other and to support each other without, without telling them what to do, honestly. Or they
Well,
tell
yeah.
them, but like there's this mutual respect kind of. But I think you have a
Well,
good
yeah.
take on it.
Well, I would just say the Jimmy character ends up telling people what to do. So
Yeah, true.
he changes it. But then he also tries different ways. But I love, and I think you almost said it, is meeting people where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing, is like, it was so on the fly. And I didn't even realize it at the very beginning what the Paul character was doing, because he realized that Jimmy's daughter needed to talk to somebody. And she's a teenager, and, obviously there was no issues,
Right.
And somehow they ended up meeting on a park bench, and maybe you remember the origin of how they did it. And she would just bring him a hat, and it kind of turned into this ritual that they would do.
Yeah.
And he would just very gently give her this advice that she needed. She would kind of say what was going on. And if you didn't catch on what was going on, like if you hadn't been to therapy, maybe you wouldn't recognize that they're in therapy.
Yeah.
And he just gave her that gift. And I thought, gosh, he was definitely more complex than we knew, because he just came off like a grumpy old man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we never really saw him in a therapy session with anyone, because we saw Jimmy in therapy sessions, but we didn't see him.
That's true.
Yeah, and but it was so gentle and he was so profound when he would give her the advice. And I was thinking about, and you had told me about this, and I brought it up to my son the other day. He went through some really hard times, and we gave him a therapist, and he just didn't like him. And therapists would just be like, asking these questions, and he's like, I don't want to talk to you about this. There wasn't the camaraderie, there wasn't the relationship. And, you had told me that there was this guy who would play video games with his clients, and they would talk about things. And I mentioned that to Aiden. He said, that would have worked so well for me. He goes, that just makes so much sense, that I could be busy doing something and not sitting there staring at someone talking about my issues, but that I still have the space to talk about things while I'm busy doing other things,
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Paul did, and I just think therapists out there that would like to do that as a career, there is a need. So
yeah. I feel like
the video game therapist.
Yeah, I feel like until we can really understand how to be in relationships, if we can understand how to be in relationships and be good at relationships, we won't need therapy. Because the therapist really is there to create a relationship with you. In some therapists, they become the caretaker. They become, the lost inner child's caretaker, honestly. And then in some like in IFS, you're really supposed to help the individual, their self, become, this parental type figure. But it's someone to bond to. I mean, and so in therapy, you learn that you become their bonded figure. That is what the most important thing you can do, is be their bonded figure. And I was just on a Q&A today for, we're going to start learning IFS coaching. And so they had a Q&A, and it was just so interesting to hear people's parts come up, like, well, what do we do with this? Or I don't know how to do that. And they were trying to answer the questions. And I wanted so badly to just raise my hand and say, can I talk? I'm so but it's like people need someone to see you. People want to be seen. They want to be heard. The answers to their questions are less important than being seen and heard and acknowledged. And that's what they did. Even there would be times where the Paul character, whether he was talking to the daughter or, it was like, you're going to do that. It was absolutely don't do that kind of a thing. But you just, that's the process of learning to know she's at an age. She has to learn some things. You can't just tell somebody what to do like they want. It's not about being a therapist or a coach isn't about being an authority figure over your clients. It's really about walking the path with them, because we don't do it right yet. I hope someday we will, but our relationships, because we have so many wounds that are unhealed, and because we put on so many masks, we don't really get a really clear pure relationship. And so you go to therapy and that's what you're trying to work on, is that clear, you know, somebody that sees you and mirrors you and can reflect back kind of a little bit of the truth that you're kind of forgetting for a minute, you know?
Wow. Yeah. And I'm not really gonna spoil something, but like just watching the latest Thunderbolts movie, that was illustrated so beautifully in that. And there this one character was making everybody see their trauma. And there was one part when she's like, he said, this is the happiest trauma. And she's like, there's other scary ones. And she said, I think we need to go to that scary one. And I'll go with you.
Yeah.
And like, to me, that was so special. Like, having somebody go with you to those scary places is so important. Like, because you're not going there for a reason, right? You can't go there by yourself.
No.
And they're not taking over for you.
Mm-mm.
They're not experiencing it for you, but they're there with you. And to that point in this show, a lot of the characters were doing that for each other, and they weren't therapists. The neighbor was doing that for the dog.
True.
None of them were doing it perfectly, but they're in their own special ways with their own gifts. They were being there. And I love the idea of found family, that theme of found family. And that's really what they became, is all these people came in with no direct relation to each other, and they became the support system for each other. And I love that.
Hey, it's Paris. I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
You know that feeling when someone shows up for you just when you need it most? That's what Uber is all about. Not just a ride or dinner at your door. It's how Uber helps you show up for the moments that matter. Because showing up can turn a tough day around or make a good one even better. Whatever it is, big or small, Uber is on the way. So you can be on yours. Uber, on our way.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about it as we were watching, you were saying how it took a minute because they would call each other out too. They weren't just like, oh, that's nice, but they knew each other enough to say, like, hey, you're messing up. And they'd call each other out as friends. That's different than therapy. But as friends, it was like they had this kind of relationship where, and then the next you'd be like, what the heck? I couldn't ever say that to somebody. Forget it, never. And then the next scene, they come back and they say, maybe you were right, or, hey, sorry, I know that I was hard on you. And there's like a second to, there was a minute to really want the best for someone else, and of course it was a show. So they're like, you effer, but they had that kind of established, like they had this clear connection that those kind of things didn't need to break it. Do you know what I mean? Those kind of things, they left room for people to make mistakes in their relationships, and they were willing to repair when they needed to. It's like you need both those.
Right. Yeah.
You need both of those. You need to know that there's going to be repair, and then you can be, you got to have both. That's it.
I think another part is another theme in the show is the radical honesty.
Mm-hmm.
There's times when Jimmy in particular really likes to talk, and he'll just kind of go off and be really, really brutally honest sometimes. And I've really been trying to do that in my life. After we talked to Katie Hendricks earlier this year, that was one of the things that really stuck out to me in our conversation was telling the truth.
Yes.
And they, the saying is truth hurts sometimes. And yet, like with even Love on the Spectrum, like they're telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm uncomfortable here.
But you know what?
So,
Lying's uncomfortable too. That's the thing.
yeah,
Like,
but
is
sometimes
lying
it's not.
better?
Sometimes it's not even lying. Sometimes it's just not being vulnerable.
That's true.
Like I was having an issue with a friend, like my kid's friend's mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, in that moment, I thought, could I just make it sound pretty and like, oh, we would just put this up to play, or can I be honest and say like, listen, my daughter's really lonely and she really is looking for a playmate. So when it comes across, did that land? It didn't. They weren't ready for my honesty, but I felt at least good in myself to know that I told the truth. I wasn't just going to make it look pretty and pretend like nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will create an opportunity for them in the future to do that.
Yeah. But I think that's what this show is about. It's finding your tribe, because the people that are in your tribe are going to be able to hold that. They are going to be able to hear that. And it's more about finding your tribe than it is saying the right thing. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because obviously, if they can't hold authenticity, or if they can't hold the truth, it's just a different you're just riding a different frequency. Or your notes are just out of tune, but you both could fit with other notes,
Yeah.
And so I mean, that's something I'm preaching to myself too. It's like, you think you've got to show. I mean, I feel like that's what this show a little bit, and Love on the Spectrum, both, and the Muppets, you could even say, that they are trying to tell you is that, being yourself is not wrong. Never. It's never wrong. We just have to find our crew. We just have to find our tribe. And because that's a possibility. Like I say, in this show, I'm repeating myself, but like, they call each other out, or they say, why don't you didn't help me? And they'll have like a blow up, but they always come back, hey, they always go in for the repair, or they might say, hey, you said that and that wasn't right for me. And so they're brutally honest. So, but it's not just one-sided. They come back and the repair. And so there's this trust within this group that, hey, I can say what I want, but I'm also gonna know when I'm off, or you can tell me when I'm off, or and it's not their sense of themselves is just more solid, so it doesn't wipe me out, And when they are sad, and they have regret, they there's times when they have regret, or maybe even shame. They feel it and they work to repair it. They want to repair it rather than, don't shame me. You know what I mean? It's more like, hey, you wouldn't say that if there wasn't something there. There's that trust there. That's the kind of, they're funny, but like watching it, I think, is it possible to live in a community like that? And I hope so.
I hope so too. And as you were saying that, it like kind of closed the loop, like the card that you pulled. Like when you're watching a sitcom like Friends, they have a problem and it's ha 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 funny, but you never see the resolution. You never see the makeup after, the big fight. You just kind of end there. And that's what I think this show, like I said, is satisfying, because it closes that loop. They sat in that tension, and you felt the tension, and then they worked on it. And and it wasn't overnight. Usually it wasn't in one episode.
It wasn't. That's what keeps you binging, because you're like, we can't end it now. They're in the middle of a fight.
So did you have a favorite episode?
There's 2 seasons, right? There's 2 seasons. And I liked how another part of this, so one part of the story is the total spoiler alerts if you haven't seen it. But like when Paul has his girlfriend, he gets this girlfriend, and she's married, right? She's married. And to me, even though like it was, but her husband was in like in a Alzheimer home, he didn't even remember who she is. I feel like this show just kind of brings up these most awkward situations you possibly can, like those really hard things, and says, what do we do with it?
Well, it's an ethical dilemma. There's a lot of ethical dilemmas.
Right, exactly. Because, here she is
or
married.
Dilemmas.
Yeah, she's married, but she's her husband's, not quite there. What do you do? She cares about this husband. And so anyway, they begin to date. And, she takes him to visit her husband, and but very much just like, I felt like, over and over again, especially like the young girl, I totally identified when she's like, I don't want to be the girl with the dead mom. Like that became her identity at school. And I get that. I've been there in my own way. And, um, but their life isn't perfect, but they're going to do things there, and they've got to do things their own way. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be different. Like the dad at the end, kind of spoils her with her own car, like that he maybe wouldn't have done. But it's like, you know what? We can't, you kind of think your life has to go on this trajectory. And it's like things happen and you just can't stay on that trajectory just like that. Like her husband's in this Alzheimer clinic. Like she's not going to have the relationship that she wants. That's just impossible. And here's this person that she can have a relationship with it. If you get into the ethics of it, it gets really messy. But at the same time, to me, watching that, I'd be like, I hear you, girl. You know what I mean? I'm like, I get you. Like I would, and it kind of gives you permission to kind of look at your life and say, okay, what are the obstacles in my life? I'm going to have to lead my life differently. And it's not going to be like anyone else. It might not, someone else might be repulsed at how you do your thing, but this is how we have to do our life. And so you both have this, grief. There's just this constant grief of life not going how you want. Every character has major disruptions that just makes it difficult for them to live the life that they really want. And so they have to do it a different way. Plan B, maybe plan Z for some, And
I was gonna say, yeah.
And to me, those kind of shows are comforting because I've been there. And some of the shows where it just happily ever after, I don't even have time for it sometimes. I'm like, that's just not real life. I can't do that right now. I can't.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think my favorite episode was the last one, the Thanksgiving episode.
Yes.
And, there was a lot of repair done. And I think I loved Paul's speech at the end. He kind of ends up showing his soft side and telling everybody kind of is really, holds his cards really close. And he kind of decides, I've got to show my cards.
Yes.
And everyone really loved it. Jimmy's like, I knew you had it in you, to tell him at the end. But, and then there's that. And then the character of Louis, I think. So yeah. Brett Goldstein, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Who we just talked about in the Muppet episode, was a writer for this. And, he must have gone to therapy if he's writing all of this, or maybe he just had really good consultants, but there's, he, major spoiler, but you can still really enjoy the show without it. But anyway, he's the one that they found out murdered his wife in a car accident, and he's trying to rebuild his life. He abandoned his girlfriend because he felt so horrible and all the shame. And then, had the shame reinforced when he told people what had happened, people started abandoning him.
Yeah.
And I loved at the end, when he was really trying to be honest, and he was at the moment of like the breaking point.
Yeah.
That finally, Jimmy found it in himself to go and talk to him. And it was so hard because there was hurt on both sides, major hurt. And yet that was the steps of leaning into that forgiveness. And like, they didn't know how they were going to do it.
Right.
I don't even think either of them knew, but it was like, well, we can just sit together. And I have been in both of those places where I've been asked to forgive and where I've just sought for forgiveness so horribly, that it just was to the breaking point. And that was so beautiful. I'm so glad they ended it that way. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to end up. And that was a happy ending, thankfully, but
I thought it was good how they let him for several episodes. Jimmy wasn't going to forgive. And I feel like that's important because some of us are in that place where I can't, and I don't know if you can force it. And so if we kind of just recognize I can't and be authentic and true about that, then the resolve can happen, and then, time happened, things happened. He didn't just do what he didn't want to do. It became the natural next step was to move toward
Right.
forgiveness. And sometimes, when we have a lot of trauma or things like that, I remember my mom saying, I don't know how to forgive when the same thing happens every day. And she's right. She's right. So we got to have some grace for that period. And I thought it was really important for them to hold that for a long time. And you, as the person, you're like, what is wrong with you? Maybe watching it, you're like, what's wrong with you? But yet we would, in that situation, we'd probably be the same way.
No, I
Right.
felt the dilemma. I felt it.
Yeah.
Like I can see both sides of that,
Yep. Totally.
and I don't know what it's going to take.
Yep. Right. And we just have to trust the flow, just like in the card. Again, we'll finish with the card. It's like, it is a journey. You're going to have the ups, you're going to have the downs, you're going to have the, I don't want to forgive. And you're going to have the point where you say, okay, I can forgive now. And I think if we move more towards truth and authenticity, the journey plays out much smoother than if we keep trying to force the journey to be what we want it to be. Because it is
Allow.
It is allow.
Hey friend, it's Shalene.
And Michelle, and we're excited to tell you about our Wholeness Library membership.
It's a vast library of videos and holistic tutorials with experts around the world who teach everything from energy healing to Reiki to chakra work, mediumship, guided meditations, and more.
With our Wholeness Library membership at just $5.55 a month, you have access to all of that online, plus monthly live Zoom meetups and our app for learning and healing anywhere, anytime.
No pressure, just love. Try us with a free 7-day trial membership, and you can cancel at any time.
Come to thewholenessnetwork.com and enjoy everything from A to Zen.
See you there.
I'm Suzanne Giesman, and if you've ever wondered about life after death, or if it's possible to connect with higher consciousness, I invite you to join me for my podcast, The Awakened Way. It's my mission to share with you that our loved ones who have passed are always with us, and we are so very loved. I want to teach you how to live a consciously connected and divinely guided life. Listen here on the mindbodyspirit.fm podcast network.
Do you want to deepen your connection to the divine, speed up your progress on the spiritual path? Then tune in to the Spirit Matters podcast. I'm the host, Philip Goldberg, and I interview experts with wisdom, insight, and practical guidance for every seeker of truth. Spirit Matters on the mindbodyspirit.fm network. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.